The Cannabis Conversation. A European perspective on the emerging legal cannabis industry.
Welcome to the Cannabis Conversation with Anuj Desai, where we explore the new legal cannabis industry by speaking to the professionals that are helping to shape it. Another really busy week on the news front, a blockbuster week if you like. There's the announcement of EMAC being acquired by Curaleaf, which is big news for the European sector. A very large number was put on that deal, with more to follow, I think, if performance targets are hit. Be interested to see what happens from here. Will there be other big US MSOs looking to make strategic headline-grabbing purchases in Europe? Let's see. Definitely be a bit of a cash injection for the sector. I've actually got an episode coming up with the Curaleaf Chief Marketing Officer in a few weeks' time, which should be good. It was pre this announcement, so we didn't really talk about that. So I've been trying to get someone from EMAC on as well, but I suspect they're pretty busy dealing with all the lovely legals involved in a massive purchase like that. Then there was also the British American tobacco investment in Organogram, which again is big tobacco getting involved in the cannabis sector. Remains to be seen whether that's a good or bad thing. I think people will have very different views on that. Whatever your views, I think it's a definite sign that big corporates are taking this more seriously. So again, may well be more to come. I had a good response to my shout out on psychedelics, and unsurprisingly, there was some positive feedback. So I will be doing a show on psychedelics, and I'm happy to welcome back Dr. Marcus Rogan, who'll be my guest to talk about some of the things that he's up to in that space and just give us a general 101 on why everyone's getting excited about psychedelic medicine. I had a bit of good news for myself this week as well. I celebrated getting 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, which is a nice little milestone. My 8-year-old son was in particular very happy with that piece of news, and he decided to tell everyone on his class Zoom call before they returned back to the classrooms this week, the last Zoom call. He proudly announced that his dad had got 1,000 subs, and the teacher asked him what his dad's podcast was all about, and he very innocently just blurted out Cannabis, which was met with an awkward silence because I think the teacher didn't know what to say, but made me quite proud and made me laugh a lot too. But on with this week's show, it's another great one, and this time it's a tale of a mother's struggle to get her child the medicine that she needs. Sick children have been a key catalyst for changing laws, so this is another very important story for all of us to know and hear. So I hope you enjoy it. On today's show, I have Vera Twomey. Vera's daughter, Ava, has Dravet Syndrome, which is a rare form of epilepsy. And Vera has been using medical cannabis to treat the condition, which has not been an easy task in Ireland, where they live. But through this, she's become quite a big advocate and campaigner and activist for increased access for medical cannabis to people that need it. She's also published a book about her struggles called For Ava, and she's been instrumental in speaking to the government and opening things up in Ireland for the medical cannabis program. Vera, welcome. How are you?
I'm very well, Anuj, and thanks for having us on. It's lovely to speak to you.
Real pleasure. We've been trying to get this on for a while, so I'm glad we can. And actually, the timing is fantastic because you've had some really good news today. Is that right?
That's right. In the last 24 hours, we've got a notification from the Department of Health to say that the Compassionate Access Programme, which was a scheme that was announced here in Ireland about 18 months ago, that finally it's going to be funded, and that there are 4 conditions within the Compassionate Access Programme that are going to be funded for patients. So, this means that a lot of patients who have had, already had conversations with their consultants who are willing to prescribe, that the financial burden of the medication might have been stopping them from moving forward, that they're going to now be able to move forward and get access to medical cannabis. So it's really exciting for a lot of Irish people today, I think.
That is fantastic news, and a great step on the way, and good recognition of all your hard work as well. So firstly, I wanted to say thank you for all the work that you're doing in this area, and we'll find out a bit more about that. But before we start, how is Ava? How's she doing?
She's in very good form, thanks. She's very well. I suppose all of us are struggling with the lockdown, and it is difficult for kids like Ava who really thrive on being in school and having interaction with other children and the support of their teachers. So she hasn't been in school now for a while, and it's a real shame, because we're doing as much as we can at home, but nothing beats getting into school and meeting her friends. So it's just a tough period. It's just a tough period with the lockdown regarding everything. I think it's difficult. It is, but her health is great. Her seizure control is excellent, and that's really the most important thing. I'm sure eventually we'll see the end of COVID, please God. So, we'll look forward to the day things are back to some bit normal again.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can definitely empathise with the homeschooling nightmare, which is particularly difficult. But yeah, good to hear that Ava's doing well. So why don't we actually kind of start at the very beginning? Actually, why don't we take a step back from that? Why don't you explain about what Dravet is and how you first found out about Ava being diagnosed with it?
Yes. Well, Ava was born in 2009, and when she was about 4 months old, kind of about April time of 2010, Ava had a seizure, and it was 45 minutes long. It was a full tonic-clonic seizure. It was absolutely terrifying. We called the ambulance. The ambulance came, took our daughter into hospital, and eventually the seizure stopped. And she subsequently had another couple of seizures while inside in the hospital. And I think the consultant immediately knew that something serious was wrong, because very quickly they were sending tests over to Glasgow at the time. So there was genetic tests done in Glasgow to identify what was causing the seizures, and the results came back telling us that Ava had Dravet Syndrome. And we were called into the hospital another day to discuss the results, and we were sat down at a table. And I'll tell you, Anoush, I'll never forget the day. We sat at the table. The consultant said to us, "Your daughter has a condition called Dravet Syndrome." We asked her, "What does this mean?" She said, "It means that your daughter will never walk, she will never talk, she will be in a wheelchair, and it's unlikely that she'll live beyond the age of 3. And it was delivered very calmly, very cool, very collected, and it was the most devastating news to a first-time parent that I can't even explain it. I remember thinking that, how do you know that she's not going to walk? Like, that was the immediate thing that I thought. I thought, we have to try. That was the first kind of reaction I think that I had. We're going to try. We're going to help her. If it means that she's in a wheelchair, yes, that's fine. But before she is in the wheelchair, we're going to try and get her to walk. And I will tell you then, over the next couple of years, over the next 7 years, in fact, we spent about 5 months of every year inside in hospital. The ambulances were coming to the house every week. I mean, we were in hospital with Ava every week or 10 days. We were regulars. It came to the point that the ambulances knew where our home was. They knew how to get to Habaluk, where we live. They knew, when they heard Ava Barry's name, that they knew exactly where to go. We knew the ambulance people by first name terms. And over the course of the years, we went through every single pharmaceutical medication that was available and not contraindicated for Dravet syndrome. And one by one, they all failed. Some caused improvement for a time, but subsequently the seizures would break back through. And at one stage, Ava was on 15 tablets a day. She was having side effects to the medications like drooling, lethargic. She was just not with us because she was on so much pharmaceutical medication, but she was still having seizures. We were still being admitted to hospital. And it seemed like the pharmaceutical medications were being added, but each one of them was failing, Anoush, but they never removed the ones that were failing for a very long time. And over a period of time, we joined groups, like there's an organization, Dravet Syndrome UK, which are wonderful. And it was there that I started to learn about medical cannabis, because there was American parents that were also joined the UK group. And I started to hear about Charlotte Figgy, Lord of Mercy on the Child. She passed away from the COVID in April. Heard about Charlotte and how well she was doing, and saw other parents who were moving from one state to another to access medical cannabis for their children. And, this would have been, by the time I'd say Ava was 4 or 5 years old, I was beginning to seriously look into medical cannabis as an option and how we could access it. So I think that's how our journey down the road of cannabis actually started, and the learning kind of began from there.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that with us. And I was going to, you kind of answered my question. I was going to follow up with what were the kind of non-cannabis treatments that you were given, but it was a range of pharmaceutical drugs.
Yes.
And you went through all of them, and none of them really worked.
No, I remember there was one medication called Zonogram, which was actually quite a good medication for a period of time. I think that was the best one that we ever were on, but we were on all the others: Epilum, Frisium, Topmax, phenobarbital, steripental, all of them. Everything that was available, we had tried, and in the long term, they didn't succeed. Yeah.
And so was it a case of they didn't work at all, or did they work a bit at the beginning, but then eventually stopped working, or a mix?
Yeah, it varied a lot. I mean, I know that Epilum or sodium valproate is very good for a lot of patients who have generalized epilepsy, for example. But interestingly, Epilum was not effective at all for Ava. And I'm not certain whether it's successful for other patients with Dravet Syndrome, but it didn't work for us. But then, on the other hand, for a period of time, the Zonogram was quite good. And we had some seizure control for a period of time. But what I think the Dravet Syndrome is quite insidious. It battles to break back through. And that's what kept happening. The seizures would ease or stop, but they would come back. And, a lot of times then they'd come back more aggressively after a break in seizure activity. And it ended up that we had the conversation with one of the doctors and nurses inside the hospital where they said, you need to take your daughter home and make her comfortable. And I said, what do you mean by that? And they said, well, there's nothing more that we can do. The only thing that we can offer is to retry all of the medications that have already failed. And I said, they didn't work the first time. So what is the possibility of them working the second time? And the best response that I got to that question was the answer being limited, a limited chance. So we knew that we had to get cannabis. We knew that we had to access something. And in October of 2016, Charlotte's Web became available in Ireland. So we got the Charlotte's Web for Ava and we started it. And initially we had 13 seizure-free days, which we had never had in Ava's life. And subsequently in the October, November and December, I think in total, Ava had 12 seizures. Now, that was in a 3-month period in the winter, which is the most difficult time for children like Ava to be well. And it was insane. It was absolutely incredible. She was coming out of herself and improving before our eyes. And we knew then at that stage that we had made a positive decision, but we hadn't it under prescription. It was very expensive. And we wanted the cooperation of a consultant, because if you needed to go to hospital, you want to go into hospital and to be able to discuss the cannabis oils and the cannabis medication. But we weren't at that stage at that time, So we continued and her improvement continued. And in the spring of 17, the seizures started to break back through. But Anoush, the thing was that in our own minds, we had made a tremendous breakthrough with initially trying the CBD because we had seen that it was a good decision and we had seen the benefits of it with our own eyes. And then we needed the THC, but we could not access THC legally in Ireland. So it was then that we were forced in June of 17 to pack our bags, load up our car. And I had to put I had to put 4 children into our car, load up our car, and we drove to Holland. That's what we did.
Wow.
We couldn't fly because the flying was too dangerous for Ava. So we got a ferry from Dublin. We drove from Cork. Cork is down the bottom of the country, south of the country. We drove to Dublin. We got the ferry to, I'm not sure where, whatever the port is over in Wales. And we drove across Wales over to Harwich. We got the ferry to Hook van Holland. We found a consultant in the Netherlands who prescribed Ava's medical CBD and THC. So it was then that we firstly had it prescribed by a doctor in the Netherlands. And the Irish government then made us stay over there for 6 months to prove that it worked. So that was extremely difficult. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. There's so much there. So if we can take it back to Charlotte's Web, what actual form was that? Were you taking an oil? Was Ava taking? And is it pure CBD? Charlotte's Web, is it the CBD oil?
Yeah. We were taking the advanced CBD oil, and it was just, as a lot of CBD presents, it was in a bottle, and there was a suggested amount based on Ava's weight to take, and she took it twice daily, and it was so effective.
So through the process of this, initially you had great results, but then things started creeping back and you were forced to go to Holland. How had you engaged with the authorities in Ireland at that stage? And it sounds like the feedback wasn't great.
Yeah, well, I mean, I suppose I have been very determined over the course of the time. I probably didn't mention there to you that prior to us going to Holland, there was 2 things that I did that were, I suppose, they were a reaction to the way that we were being treated by the Department of Health and the Irish government at the time. In it was the end of February, March of 17, communication with the Department of Health had completely broken down, absolutely, completely gone. There was even one of the officials had hung the phone up on me and just banged the phone down. And I could put my hand up and honestly say that I would speak to anybody, the way we are speaking now on the phone. I was never aggressive or bad language or anything like that. I did my best to keep my cool, but they were tired of listening to me and tired of my questions. So the communication was gone. So I decided, Janusz, that if it was Simon Harris was the Minister for Health at the time. And I said, if Simon won't talk to me, then I'm going to talk to Simon. So I put on my coat, I put my bag on my back, and I walked out the door and I walked to Dublin. And it's about 250 miles. And it was something that I felt I had to do. I didn't know what was going to happen, but I just knew that even if I walked the whole ways on my own, I had no expectation about what was ahead of me, but I just knew that I had to get this for Ava. But what happened was that the whole country got behind my child, and it was unbelievable. We walked for 9 days. I put the message out on Facebook, and one of the reporters from the TV3 news station, I had contacted him to tell him what I was doing. He told me to wait and don't move until I come out. And they filmed me leaving my home to walk. It went out in the news, it went out in social media, and people started to join me. And by the time we got to Dublin, I would say that there must have been at least 5,000 to 7,000 people had walked part of that road up to Dublin with me. And by the time we reached the gates of the Dáil, in the Dáil being the Parliament in Ireland up in Dublin, there must have been 6,000 or 7,000 people, I'd say, outside the gates of the Dáil shouting for my daughter. So it was such an indication of the love and support that ordinary people have for children like Ava that are in genuine, desperate need of help.
Yeah.
And, we met the Minister for Health, and they made a lot of promises. They reneged on their promises. And after that, we went to the Netherlands. Prior to the walk to Dublin, I had also taken a flight over to the Calapa clinic in Barcelona to access the prescription for medical cannabis for Ava there. But when I came back through Dublin Airport with Ava's medicine, prescribed medicine, I had viewed it as important to say publicly what I was doing, because I felt really strongly that Ava had a right to her medicine and that I wasn't going to hide it. So they arrested me in Dublin Airport. They detained me in the airport. They seized the CBD and THC that I had brought from Spain, and they took it off me. And after that, we knew there's nothing more for us in Ireland. We've got to leave. So we left. We left in June. We thought that we'd let the children finish up their classes in school, and then after they were finished, we packed our bags and we put them in the car and we went over and rented a home over in The Hague for the period of 6 months. And when it came to September time, the school time, my children had to go back to school. So I was left then with Ava over in the Netherlands, us on our own for 3 months without the rest of my family and without the support to deal with everything until the government decided that they could allow us home.
Wow. That's incredible and heartbreaking as well. One of the things that has really kind of changed, and it's amazing to hear the support that you got. And well, I guess one of the things that people really can't argue is with sick children. And that's why stories like Charlotte Figge in the States, but also Billy Caldwell in the UK and various other stories around the world, they're really hard to argue with.
Yes, I think Alfie Dingley's story is...
And Alfie as well, yes.
...is a fantastic representation of Hannah's work and effort as well to do everything honestly and correctly and to get the best possible outcome for her child, and to share the information about how to approach this or how to access the medication with other families, because I think that sharing is very important, because it's a very, very difficult road on your own. And it's really so important that there are, reliable, strong women like Hannah out there that, are sharing the honest information about the treatment and how to go about it. I really do.
Wow, that's such a great story, and thank you for doing all of those things. And what was lovely is to hear that fantastic support that you got, with people joining you on your walk. And I think one of the ways that cannabis is sort of being reintegrated into the world is through, unfortunately, sick children like Ava, and hearing the stories and the troubles and the challenges that parents have had to go through in order to get medicine for their children. And it's really hard to argue, it takes away all those moral and political arguments that people have against cannabis when parents are going to do what they need to do to help their children, basically.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
And have you found, because these stories have been the catalyst for change across the world with lots of different kids. You mentioned Charlotte, but we've had Alfie and Billy in the UK. Do you interact with some of those parents and share knowledge?
Absolutely, yes. I found Paige Figge to be just a wonderful girl, just such a kind and genuine person. And I spoke to her on a number of occasions. And I will tell you that when Charlotte passed away in April, I never had the privilege of meeting Charlotte. I would have loved to have met Charlotte and just, held her hand or, got her a little gift or something. But I never did. And when she passed away in April, it nearly broke my heart, because she was almost like part of our family, because it was Paige's struggle that inspired me to do to let me see that it was possible. And we loved Charlotte. We celebrated her success. We celebrated her being so well, riding her bike, doing all the things that she was doing. And, we hoped that Ava would do the same in time. And she's a wonderful girl. And, you need people like that will share and talk to you and be honest with you. And that has to be deeply appreciated, because that's how you learn and find a way to find your own journey and your own road to achieve what you need to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And have you similarly linked up with parents in Ireland that are having the same sort of struggles as you?
That's right, absolutely. I mean, I'm in contact with a lot of families here in Ireland that are going through the same kind of situation. I suppose I have a great affinity with Hannah Deacon because Hannah and I ended up living on the same street over in the Netherlands when we were both over there looking for medical cannabis prescriptions for our children. So I know that Hannah suffered while she was over there the same way that I did, because we were struggling. We were on our own for part of the time with our children, with so much to do, with minding them and, doing all the phone calls and all the necessary things that had to be done to access the medication. And, I've made some wonderful friends because of this, met some wonderful people, that really care about putting out the information and sharing with other people, how to go about achieving the ultimate goal, which is access to the medical cannabis for the kids,
Yeah. So that brings it around quite nicely. So where is the situation at the moment in Ireland in terms of access? You mentioned at the beginning that there's been some progress around helping some of the funding because it's expensive, but generally speaking, what's the landscape for medical cannabis in Ireland?
Yeah, I guess, Anush, what is really missing in Ireland, I feel, is education for consultants and doctors surrounding the prescribing of medical cannabis. I think that there needs to be education brought for a lot of the consultants. And in fact, and it's just my opinion, but I feel that not only consultants should be allowed to prescribe medical cannabis, but I think GPs should be allowed to prescribe medical cannabis as well. And in fact, a lot of times we have a better relationship with our GPs because we see them more often. So it would make sense, because they know us better and know our family members better, that they should be prescribing the medical cannabis as well. There's about 50 people after being prescribed medical cannabis in Ireland. And, we briefly spoke about the Compassionate Access Programme earlier, but there's only a limited number of conditions under the Compassionate Access Programme. So I feel that, it is a step that the Compassionate Access Programme is being funded, but there needs to be an expansion of the Compassionate Access Programme to include chronic pain patients, to include Parkinson's patients, to include patients with many other different conditions where there is proven evidence that it's of great assistance to people with these illnesses, and, needless to, probably, and cancer as well. Because it is a worthwhile and very effective medication for all of those conditions, and it needs to be broadened. But I suppose we've started from zero in the majority of countries on this issue, and it's taken 6 years to get to this point in the Republic of Ireland with our situation. But I think we'll move forward. I think it's small steps, but we will get there, because people's perception has changed dramatically, even in 5 or 6 years since we started campaigning for Cannabis for Ava. So, it will improve. I'm hopeful that things will get better for people.
Yeah, so it sounds like a very similar picture to one that we have in the UK. And I would actually argue we're probably starting on a minus number rather than zero, because it's so much stigma, isn't there? And you have to overcome that, because people just generally think it's a bad thing. And
so you
have
really
to first explain it's not a bad thing, and then it actually is very helpful.
You're so dead right. You're dead right that it probably is a minus figure that you're starting from, actually, because, Anush, when we started looking for medical cannabis for Ava first, I remember there was a gentleman who lived not too far up the road from us. And at the time he said to us, it's fantastic that the cannabis is going to work for Ava, but I have one question for you. How are you going to get her to smoke it? And he just didn't know. He didn't know anything about it. And we explained, no, we would never get our daughter to smoke. Of course not. It's an oil, and you take it as an oil. And he was so interested and so excited for Ava to get better. And he became literally the local correspondent for cannabis. Anybody that had any criticism above in the pub for the cannabis, he'd put them straight and explain to them all about it. And, it's the kindness of people. They wanted Ava to succeed, but they didn't know that there was a there was recreational cannabis and medical cannabis, or, cannabis for medicine, or whatever way you'd like to describe it, So it's changed. It's changed a lot.
That's such a lovely story, though, that people are just generally ignorant about it. It doesn't mean that they're kind of negative about it. Just didn't know about it. But your story was so inspiring that it took him to really look into it, and he then becomes a quite a big advocate for it, which is really lovely to hear.
100%. Yeah, I mean, like, it's not that people are ignorant, it's just that people are ignorant to the facts about the issue, which is, different, because this gentleman, he really wanted to know. He was excited to have the facts and to be able to, not even just keep that information to himself, but to inform other people that, didn't know what the story was. And I just thought that was lovely, really, really kind. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's great. And the key message behind that is it is education, isn't it? Getting the message out there, getting people to really understand what this is about. Look, I mean, there's loads of stuff I could ask you about. I just want to end on the book that you wrote, the struggles that you've been going through, and with 4 children as well. You got quite a lot on your plate. What inspired you to add a book writing to that as well?
To be honest with you, it was 2 things. The first thing was, I've always been very conscious of my girls and my son, seeing, like, it's just funny that they came up there a moment ago to say, Mummy was on the television, because there was a program that was on about 2017, and we were included in the news of that year. I had to do a lot of stuff. I had to go to meetings. I spoke at different events. I was up and down to Dublin frequently, up to the Dáil, to meetings and different things. And, we always approached Ava's illness and looking for the medical cannabis with honesty to the children. I always explained to them, well, Mummy's going up to Dublin to meet Simon to see if we can get the cannabis for Ava, and I'll be back tonight, and I'll be down the train, and, whatever it is. And I kind of felt that I wanted to write it down for my children, so that when my children are older, that they'll be able to read the whole thing for themselves, and that they'll have a full understanding of what was going on and what I was doing for Ava, because it affected them as well. Like, I'll give you an example. My second daughter, Sophia, for example, she wants to be a doctor, and she has wanted to be a doctor from the time she could almost talk. I'd say from the time she was 2 or 3 years old. I remember her saying to me, Mummy, I want to be a doctor so I can stop the babies from the seizures. Kind of, that really stayed with me. I mean, I couldn't stop the seizures at the time. They were happening. We had to deal with them. But that's my little girl, and she's still on it. Like, she's still talking about, she's 9 years old now. She still wants to be a doctor. She wants to help people. And I guess I wanted them to be able to read about what we went through, and why Mummy was on the phone a lot, or why Mummy was, talking at meetings, or turned up on the television sometimes, or whatever it was. And the other thing, I suppose, I remember, Anoush, when we started on this journey, and we were so alone. Like, we didn't know where to turn. You could not go to the medical professionals like you normally would to get information about medical cannabis. And it took a lot of time to find answers and to find help from other people. And I thought that if I wrote the book, and if I outlined our story and the way things were, and the way cannabis changed Ava's life completely, I thought maybe that could give another mother some hope, because hope is so important to keep you going. It really, really is. And sometimes when you'd be dealing with a situation like this, you feel hopeless. You don't know where to turn. And I think that we were lucky. We were very, very lucky that there was people within the cannabis community in Ireland that were so kind and so genuine and so willing to share their knowledge about cannabis, because a lot of them helped me educate myself about it. And pointed me in the right direction. And so the book was kind of twofold. They were the main two reasons to just write down for the kids. But if it was possible to help somebody with it, then that was going to be a positive thing as well.
Fantastic. Thank you, Vera. I mean, like, you know, not everyone wants to assume that mantle of being a kind of spokesperson and sort of leading the charge. It can be scary, but it's brilliant that you did do that. And it's even better that you chose to share it and help let people know that they're not alone. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate that. I guess I never intended to be known for this issue surrounding cannabis, but I do feel that when there are, particularly, as you said earlier, when there are children involved, if you find a solution to help your own child, then you kind of, you know, morally, it's the right thing to do to share that information with other parents as well, isn't it? To give them the opportunity to maybe find some improvement for their child's life as well. Because I can honestly say to you that if we didn't have the intervention of medical cannabis for Ava when we got it, and continue to have it now, that she wouldn't have been able to continue with the seizures. They were too severe. She wouldn't have survived. So we're very, very blessed. We're blessed to have her, and we're blessed to have the cannabis for her as well.
I'm glad to hear it, and again, thank you so much. Thank you for coming on the show and sharing your story. It's really inspirational, and I'll be sure to put a link to the book when we push the show out.
Thank you so much.
And Vera, it'd be great to get you on again to sort of hear an update on how things are going in Ireland at some point later in the year, and hopefully we can talk about this in a post-COVID world, which would be beautiful.
Yes, wouldn't it? Yeah.
Yes, it would, but
it would be really nice to just, you know, with the kids back in school, they'll all be geniuses after we have taught them at home for all this time.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. Yes, completely. And we'll also be happy, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, Vera, I'll leave you now, but thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to speaking to you again.
Thanks so much. I will too. All the best, Anush. Thanks very much indeed.